Welcome to the 2012 MacBook Pro 15-inch Unibody Take-Apart Guide. You can locate your model number and your serial number of your machine on the bottom. Locate and remove the 10 small Phillips screws from the bottom of the machine. Once the screws have been removed, you can then remove the bottom plate. The very next thing you need to do is unplug your battery. It is important to not have any power to the machine while you are working on the internals. On the right hand side of the battery, you will find that there is a screw underneath the sticker. There will be 3 tri-wing screws in all to remove from the battery. Now that the screws have been removed, all you need to do is lift on the plastic tab in the center of the battery and slide the battery out. Now to remove the RAM chips. There is a plastic leg on each side of the RAM chips. Carefully push the legs away from the RAM chips to release them. After the upper chip is released, you can lift it out. Then do the same for the lower RAM chip. Now to remove the fans. Use your nylon spudger tool to carefully lift the fan's cable connections away from the logic board. Once they have been unplugged, you can now use your T6 screwdriver to remove the screws from the fans. There are 3 screws in each fan. After all the screws have been removed, you can then easily remove the fans. Now to remove the hard drive. You will need to loosen the 2 screws from the hard drive mounting bracket. Once the 2 screws have been loosened, the mounting bracket can be removed. The 2 screws in the mounting bracket will not come out. They are a part of the mounting bracket. Now you can lift the hard drive up by the clear plastic tab and then unplug the SATA connection from the hard drive. You will notice that there are 4 T6 screws on the hard drive. These are the mounting screws. If you are upgrading your hard drive, you will need to remove these screws and install them on the new drive. Now to remove the hard drive cable. First, unplug the hard drive cable from the logic board. Then there are 2 small Phillips screws holding down the hard drive flex cable that will need to be removed. The hard drive cable also includes the hard drive mount and sleep light assembly as well. You will need to remove the 2 long Phillips screws from the mount. And then carefully pry the small flex cable from the top case. Next, you can remove the wireless card. First, unplug the wireless flex cable from the logic board. And then carefully unplug the EyeSight cable from the logic board as well. Now use the pointed end of the nylon spudger tool to lift up on the wireless antenna cables to unplug them. Once all of the cables are unplugged, you will then need to unroute all of the cables and antennas from the plastic cable guide. Next, remove the two Phillips screws from the wireless card mount. Once the two screws have been removed, you can then remove the wireless card. To remove the wireless card from the mount, you will need to remove the material that is covering the card. Once the material has been removed, you can then see where the wireless flex cable is plugged into the wireless card. Use your spudger tool to lift the flex cable out of the card. Now on the opposite side of the card, you will have to remove the 3 Phillips screws from the card to remove it. Now to remove the SuperDrive. Use the flat side of your nylon spudger tool to unplug the SuperDrive flex cable from the logic board. Now there are 3 T6 screws that have to be removed from the SuperDrive. One is located on the mount close to the logic board, and the other 2 are near the edge of the casing located here. Once the screws have been removed, the SuperDrive can then be lifted out. Next, to remove the speaker assembly. First, use your spudger tool to unplug the speaker cable from the logic board. The right speaker assembly consists of 2 parts that are attached together. There are 3 Phillips screws in each section that have to be removed. Once the 6 screws have been removed, the whole speaker assembly can then be lifted out. Now to begin taking out the logic board. First, remove the cable guard located here. There are 2 small Phillips screws that have to be removed. Now use the flat side of your spudger tool to lift up on the top case flex cable tensioner, and then slide the flex cable out of its connection. Then lift up on the Trackpad flex cable to unplug it from the logic board. Then carefully lift the metal flip lock from the LVDS cable connection and slide the cable out to unplug it. Next, lift the lock that is holding the keyboard backlight flex cable and slide it out of the connection. Next, double check all the cable connections to make sure they're all unplugged. Now remove the 7 T6 screws from the logic board. You will need to lift the logic board up and move it to a position like this so that you can unplug the MagSafe cable from the underside of the logic board. Now use your spudger tool to unplug the microphone flex cable and the speaker cable from the logic board. And then remove the 2 Phillips screws from the speaker assembly to remove it. Next, remove the 6 Phillips screws from the heatsink assembly. When the heatsink is removed, you will notice the old thermal paste. Remember that before you reseat the heatsink back on the board, you will need to apply new thermal paste. Before you place your logic board anywhere, make sure that you place it in an anti-static bag first to keep the board from shorting out. To remove the center logic board bracket, there are 2 Phillips screws that have to be removed. Next, you can remove the trackpad. First, carefully separate the trackpad flex cable from the casing by carefully lifting it up. You will also need to lift the black adhesive pad so you can remove the flex cable from underneath it. Next, remove the 4 small silver Phillips screws from the trackpad mounting bracket. Once the screws have been removed, the trackpad will lift out of place like this. You will need to carefully guide the cable through to remove it. Now remove the 2 T6 screws from the MagSafe board. Once the screws are out, the MagSafe board can be removed. Now remove the right and left cable guides that sit on top of the hinges. There is 1 Phillips screw in each guide. Now it is time to unscrew the hinges from the top case to remove the display. Before you begin taking the screws out of the hinges, you will need to have the machine in the open position, like this. It is easier if you place the keyboard face down, with the display hanging off the edge of your workbench. There are 3 T6 screws in each hinge to remove. Once all the screws are out of the hinges, you can then remove the top case from the display assembly. Now to remove the clutch cover from the bottom of the display. Take hold of the clutch cover and slightly slide it to the right. After it slides to the right, you can then lift it up and off the display. Next, you can remove the hinges. There are 3 T6 screws in each hinge. There are 2 on the bottom and 1 on the top of each hinge. Now to remove the glass from the display. You will need to use a heat gun to heat up the glass to make the adhesive tacky so it is easier to remove. Do not point the heat gun right at the edge of the display because you can easily melt the rubber trim that is outside the glass. Point the heat gun in about 2 or 3 inches from the edge. Now that the glass is heated up a bit, you will need to take 2 pry tools. In this case, I'm using 2 iPad take-apart tools to lift the glass up. First, by using one pry tool, you'll need to take your time to slowly lift the glass, just enough to get one tool behind it. Once you're able to get one tool behind the glass, then use your second tool to help separate the glass. You'll need to just slowly move your way around the glass, not lifting too far because it can easily break. Just gently walk the two tools as you go along the entire edge of the glass. Once you have gone around the top and the two sides, you can then carefully lift the glass to separate the glass from the bottom. Now remove the 6 black Phillips screws that are holding down the LCD panel. Next, remove all of the Phillips screws from the antenna assembly. Once all the screws have been removed, then unmount the antenna assembly so that the LVDS cable can move more freely. Now begin lifting the LCD out of place by carefully guiding the LVDS cable into the display a little so that you can lean the LCD forward to unplug the LVDS cable from the back of the display. Once you are able to lean the LCD forward, you can remove the black tape from the LCD connector. You will then need to use your spudger tool to lift the lock bar from the connector, and then slide the LVDS cable out of the connection. Now you can carefully remove the LVDS cable from the display. Now remove the two screws at the top of the display holding down the iSight camera board, and then remove the camera and the board from under the casing. As you unroute the cable from the edge of the casing, you will need to remove the Phillips screws that are holding the cable in place. Now unplug the camera board from the iSight cable. You can now see that the camera can be removed from the camera board by using your spudger tool to lift the connection off the board. Now carefully guide the iSight cable out of the casing to remove it. You will also notice that the sleep magnet is in the left-hand side of the back case.